and welcome to another Window on the Week, where we will interview industry professionals and thought leaders on their perspective on ESG issues. The International Integrated Reporting Council, IIRC, published an update in January this year, guiding corporates on how to report to stakeholders in an integrated manner. The IIRC's long-term vision for integrated reporting to be embedded into mainstream business practice and not just to be an afterthought. The rise of stakeholder capitalism, which was very evident in the Davos WEF hosted event, highlighted the need to report on all ESG metrics accurately and transparently. These aspects are measured by Risk Insight's ESG GPS rating tool, where mandatory and voluntary reporting is used as an input into our AI rating tool. Here with me today is Desiree Jones, the Managing Director of Alchemy Creative Studios, who specialize in integrated reporting and related communication. We will be discussing the update to the IIRC reporting framework and what that means for corporate reporting, especially in terms of ESG. Thank you for being here today, Desiree. So let's start. Why do you believe that the IIRC reporting framework is important for corporates?
Well, thank you very much for having me on today. I'm very appreciative of this chance. So I think that the framework, the most important part, as you mentioned, that the IIRC's mission is to ensure that integrated thinking becomes a mainstream business process. And at its heart, integrated thinking is about understanding the relationship between financial and non-financial factors and how they create value. And I don't think this is new. We've always known that successful companies are managing a number of factors well: their employees, their stakeholders, their brand, their intellectual capital. So we view the framework as a tool to help these companies tell their story better. The framework itself is relatively straightforward, it's principles-based, and it helps companies ensure that they're sharing their story in a concise and holistic way. And I think that in an increasingly complex operating and reporting context, it's invaluable to have a tool that's designed to help you share your story in a meaningful way. And after all, that's essentially the purpose of any reporting we're doing, to share insights that then help your stakeholders make better decisions about your company and your organization.
That's very interesting, Desiree. Thank you for that. So what are the major differences between the 2013 IIRC framework and the one that was recently launched in January?
So the one that was launched in January is really a revision of the original framework, which was launched in 2013. And the purpose of this revision was to support better reporting. And they went through quite an interesting process with an extensive consultation to the market. So I think they consulted with almost 1,500 individuals and across 55 jurisdictions. And through its consultation process, the IIRC determined that the framework itself remains fit for purpose, but there were areas where people were struggling with it. So what they've done is essentially clarified those areas rather than re-looked at the entire framework. The main changes that they focused on was on an increased focus on balance. So as report preparers, we all have a tendency to focus on the positive, and the framework's now asking us to make sure that we're telling a more balanced story. So moving away from just talking about value creation to ensure that we're talking about value creation, preservation, and erosion. And this encourages more transparent and balanced reporting, which I think then makes our reporting more credible to our stakeholders. The framework also updated the business model disclosure, which is enormously helpful. There's been a lot of confusion at times about the difference between the outputs and outcomes within the business model. And the framework has gone into quite a bit of detail to specify and help us understand the difference between the two. And then again, it encourages more balanced reporting here. And then finally, one of the bigger changes is that the statement of responsibility has been simplified. This was tricky for it was tricky in several jurisdictions, but the statement of responsibility is now much easier, more simple, and it also gives insight into the underlying process that supports the report that we're reading. So again, just a revision, not a complete rework.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that highlights the differences very well. Does the updated framework make allowances for ESG reporting, given that it's become very important to do so, and other sustainability frameworks?
So the framework itself isn't looking to override other frameworks. It works in conjunction with other reporting frameworks. So it's more like a concise report that shows how the company creates value in the context that it operates in. And then what the framework relies on is other reporting frameworks for specialized stakeholders. So if you are looking for financial information, you'll go to the financial statements. If you're looking to try and understand detailed information about environmental performance, you'll go to the GRI or the SASB related disclosure. So the framework itself isn't looking to compete with other standards. It's more bringing everything together and then relying on the fact that there are other frameworks in place where specialized information can be accessed.
Makes a lot of sense, Desiree. That makes a lot of sense. So do South African companies take integrated reporting seriously? And how does integrated reporting in South Africa stack up against other parts of the world?
In general, South African companies take integrated reporting incredibly seriously. Many companies use the process as an opportunity to reflect both internally on how deeply they're entrenching integrated thinking in their business, and then also using it as an opportunity to improve how they share their story with their stakeholders. I think that a lack of interest in doing the report is actually a missed opportunity for many companies. And I think in South Africa, because of King 3 and King 4 and how supportive these governance frameworks were around integrated thinking and reporting, it's been part of our reporting landscape for several years now. So I believe that South African companies are not only producing high quality reports, but are often looking for ways to enhance their disclosure. And I think that leads to a high standard of reporting across the board.
Okay, so we are up there with the rest of the world. That's encouraging to note. And I'm sure the corporates would love to hear that as well as the JSC. Have you seen more of a focus on ESG related matters in company reporting? And where do you believe that there is room for improvement?
But there's always room for improvement. We can always do it better. I think that globally, as a reporting community and as a society, we really are beginning to truly appreciate how interconnected we all are. And it's been brought into sharp relief with the COVID pandemic, as well as climate change. And I think we're starting to understand how ESG factors play into value creation. So this has meant that companies are now focusing more on understanding how these interconnected elements affect their performance and their strategic plans. Probably the area of potential improvement is how we measure these factors and metrics so that we can make better decisions, both as a company and as stakeholders. What's also been very interesting for us has been the increased interest from ESG investors over the last few years. And this interest has then prompted companies to reflect on how they can enhance their disclosure to ensure that they're addressing the needs of these stakeholders. So I think there's both an internal drive from organizations and an external interest. And I believe that this is pushing ESG reporting and disclosure forward.
Okay, so there is definitely a keen interest in terms of ESG reporting. So are you finding there is still uncertainty on which ESG metrics to report against? And do you think corporates require guidance in this regard?
I think it's important that we remember that compared to non-financial reporting, which is well established and very, very mature, ESG reporting still has a long way to go. And I think where we are at the moment, there's a lot of confusion about what to report. However, I think there is a lot of exciting work in this space as well. So, for example, the IIRC and the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board last year announced their intention to merge into a unified organization. And their goal is to provide investors and corporates with a comprehensive corporate reporting framework. So I think at this point, there is a lot of confusion about what to report, and there are some challenges about differing frameworks and which one is the right one to choose. But I think that we're also in an exciting phase of development, and I think these types of developments are needed to simplify the reporting landscape before we start to look at mandatory disclosures. So I think that there is a lot of good work happening in the space. I think it is very challenging still though.
Okay, some interesting points there as well. So do you believe that non-financial reporting metrics will become mandatory similar to financial reporting metrics?
I think that it's very likely that non-financial reporting will become more mandatory. So when we talk about ESG reporting, just bear in mind that the G already is mandatory. So the governance reporting is, we report under very complex frameworks. In South Africa, it would be King 4. Internationally, there are other reporting frameworks that we have to report under. So I think when it comes to the social and environmental information, there are concerns about how comparable it is between companies within the same industry, across organizations, so that you can make decisions across organizations as well. What is challenging about that is that we don't have a simplified, unified framework yet. And I think if we go too quickly towards mandatory reporting, the risk is that it becomes a tick box exercise. So I think the work that is underway, particularly looking at the work that the IIRC is doing, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, previously the work of the Corporate Reporting Dialogue, I think all of that work is really important to understand how we find a fit for purpose framework that includes non-financial information so that we can have standardized information that can help inform decisions. So in my opinion, it's very likely that we will head that way, but I'm hoping that it's not something that becomes mandatory before we are at a point with a framework that is fit for purpose.
Thank you very much, Desiree, for joining us today. You shared some very interesting insights, and we hope to see you again soon and chat to you as well. Thank you. ESG disclosure is on the rise, with more companies adopting a transparent and balanced approach to reporting. There is a significant drive from investors and consumers to move companies towards sustainability. With factors like climate change, social inclusion, health and safety, and governance becoming more prevalent, companies are almost being forced into disclosure or risk losing business. While many companies still have a long way to go, some are leading the pack with transparency and corporate responsibility. I am Aneshran Pillai, Acting CEO of Risk Insights, and thank you for joining us for this episode of Window on the Week. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Stay safe.